Good afternoon, everyone, and I want to take this opportunity to tell everyone thank you for coming and joining us for this very important discussion. And there's no vital time than what's going on right now in our country. Some of the issues that are down at the border. I myself have been down to the border 3 times. Leader McCarthy just got back, was there 2 weeks ago. I'm very pleased to have Leader McCarthy here to take time to come to Central Ohio and be part of this discussion, this important discussion. We have some special guests here also that will be joining in the conversation. I want to thank A.G. Yost for hosting this and also giving us some time here. And again, thank you all so much for taking the time out of your busy schedule. All of you on the panel also, thank you so much for taking time to come out of your busy schedule and join us today. Leader McCarthy.
Well, thank you, Troy. And I want to thank the delegation from Ohio to be with us as well. This is an important issue, and our special guests, and especially the Attorney General. What we want to talk about today is, I just recently came back from the border, Eagle Pass. And on the day that I was there at Eagle Pass was the day we found the body of the National Guard. He jumped into the water. Nobody asked him to, as he's trying to protect our border, which the federal government, not from the border agents, but from this White House, has been declining to do. He jumps in to save an individual coming across the river, ends up losing his life. Reports are saying that this was individuals who were coming across with drugs. This young National Guardman was raised by his grandmother, gave his life trying to defend at the same time. And what we have found since Biden has taken office, from the very moment he took office, he stopped building the wall. We now pay more money for the materials to stay there, not to go up, and we have these openings. But what he has now done, President Biden, has made every single city in America a border city. And what does that mean? It means deaths when it comes to fentanyl. Fentanyl is now the #1 killer of Americans between the ages of 18 and 45. We just watched in 2020, overdose deaths claimed the lives of 4,410 Ohioans and 93,655 Americans. The next year, we're now at jumped to over 5,500 in Ohio and more than 107,000 Americans. This is being made in China, pushed through Mexico into America. And that's not the only thing that's coming. We have terrorists coming across this border. People on the terrorist watch list from 160 other countries. Just as I was driving up from Dayton, news broke that they just arrested an individual with ISIS ties from Ohio who was trying to bring people in through the border from ISIS to kill President Bush, because they know how to come into America. This is where I want to thank your Attorney General. He joined the lawsuit to stop Title 42 from being lifted. Title 42 is simply says if a person is coming across the border illegally and you catch them, you can send them back to their country. That should happen every single day. Now every single day what is happening is drugs are coming across this border. When you talk to the communities along the border, we now have the cartels controlling parts of our border. They become wealthier because of what people pay to come across. They're running the drugs to come across. And now many of the schools there, they've told me, where they'd have to close them for more than 40 days because of the car chases. This should not be America. We should have to be able to secure our border. And the sad part is we can, and we had. The only thing that changed was no legislation passed in Congress. It was a change at the White House and the administration of what he has done. Now the #1 killer from 18 to 45 is fentanyl, because the border is open. Number of illegal people that are just walking across from every different parts of the world. Now people on the terrorist watch list. This has become a severe problem, and it hits right at home. I'll give you just last month, 2 Ohio State University students overdosed and died from pills they thought were study drugs, but were actually laced with fentanyl. It can reach every single home, every single community in America because what is happening along our border. So what I want to do right now is I want to turn the microphone over to Attorney General Yost of the work that he has done, the leadership you have shown, and just to say thank you, because it is making a difference. Title 42 would be lifted today, and the number of people coming across that border, it's not just Republicans who have warned this presidency, Democrats, former Homeland Security Secretary Jed has warned them, you can't, the border is not secure, and had you lifted that, it'd even be worse. And this has become a real challenge, and you're seeing it right here at home. And you talked to me a little bit about even more drugs that are happening, that are being made in Mexico, that you are seeing pop up here in your own community. Let me turn it over to the Attorney General.
Thank you, Leader. I appreciate your leadership on all of these issues that we're talking about. You'll see in a moment something that we're doing here in Ohio that I'm very excited about, that's going to basically put a chemistry lab, forensic chemistry lab in every cruiser, or at least every county in a cruiser. But it's important to recognize a couple of things. Title 42 is only one of the things that we've been part of with the border. We also were one of 3 states that challenged the Interior enforcement policy, where the Secretary of Homeland Security tried to unilaterally usurp the power of our elected officials in Congress and to ignore federal statute that was passed by our duly enacted and duly elected leaders. That usurpation was initially restrained. It's up on appeal right now, but the bottom line is we know that the drugs are coming across the border. It's not the only place, but it is the easiest place. I wanted to show real quickly, this is the samples that are being submitted to BCI. There are other labs. Some of the big cities have their own labs, so this is not all drugs in the state, but it's a large sample and shows the trends here. And we see that this is, the red line here is fentanyl. We see this is spiking up again after a initial decrease in the early part of the pandemic. But this blue line up here represents something we're seeing all over Ohio, which is the number of samples being tested for methamphetamine. Methamphetamine is something that was a scourge 15 years ago, 20 years ago. It was being manufactured in rural Ohio and in clandestine small batch labs, and we saw this all over the state. That eventually subsided to a great degree. What we're seeing now, and I just was out visiting with the sheriff this very morning and heard probably for the 15th time from a sheriff the confirmation of the same thing, is that methamphetamine is again resurgent. But it's not being made out in the hollows and in abandoned buildings in Ohio anymore. It is being manufactured in large quantities on an industrial scale in Mexico, and it's coming across that southern border. And as you can see, that's continuing. It's an even bigger problem here in Ohio than fentanyl, and fentanyl is a huge problem here in Ohio. Well, one of the things that we are continuing to work on is how to get labs back quickly. For those of you who don't practice criminal law, one of the things that we have to prove, any prosecutor has to prove when they go to court and charge a drug offense, is that that powder is in fact a controlled substance, and what particular controlled substance it is and how much of it there is. A large portion of those cases go through BCI and the labs for the state, and with the amount of work that we have, we work really hard to keep that going, but in the meantime, frequently cases cannot be brought until we get the the results of that, because we don't want to start a speedy trial clock while we're waiting for drug results. Into this gap, we're bringing new technology that's very exciting. These colloquially called the 908 device. It's a portable spectrometer that has been scientifically validated by our scientists at BCI. With us here today to demonstrate it is Jessica Toms, one of our superstar heroes that wears a lab coat, although she's not wearing one today. Jessica, I'd like to turn it over to you for a brief demonstration of the 908 device, how it works, and what you're going to see as she does this is how this could change both the pace and the availability of these technologies to prosecute people that are bringing poison into our communities. Jessica?
Hi, thanks for having us. I'm going to talk as Amanda is going to push all the buttons on the device here. So this is an MX908, as Attorney General Yost said. It's a handheld mass spectrometer, so similar technology to what we're using in the laboratory for the analysis of controlled substances, just on a smaller, portable scale. Worldwide, there are about 2,000 of these in 42 countries. You talked about going to the border. There are 100 of these, approximately, that are deployed with Custom and Border Patrol for the routine identification of fentanyl. We have about 20 of these here in Ohio. We started using them for confirmation of under control or controlled buys, probable cause, and officer safety. Fentanyl being released in a cruiser at a scene, making sure that we can identify those substances and our officers can put on PPE as expected and walk away from those situations. Recently, we've created a pilot program in order to be able to put these in the field with officers so they can have court-ready results for court proceedings to kind of expedite some of those options. So it's a trace detector, and Amanda's going to show you. We pre-swabbed some things, but if you can see it, it's too much for the detector. You just place the swab in the instrument, push a button. There's only 6 buttons on the front of this, so it's very officer-friendly and rugged. It's going to start an analysis, and it always feels like an attorney when you stand up here. It takes about a minute, but when everybody's watching you, it seems like forever. In the laboratory, our analysis time typically is anywhere from 15 to 30 minutes for a sample, and then double that if you include the blanks that we run. And I was going to say you can hold it up if you need to, but you can see, you get a peak that comes across here. Hopefully we have enough to get a result. I'm a light sampler, I guess, today, so. Oh, no target detected, so we're going to move on to the next one here. Go to the next strongest one. We dilute the sample out when we start, so we don't have to do extra cleaning. So we extra diluted that one, apparently. So again, that was one test run in a minute, so we're going to run the next strongest sample.
Did that give us an answer?
That one did not, because we diluted it out further so that if we overload the instrument, you have to do some cleaning, and we prefer not to have to clean as much. So we apparently diluted it enough, but this one hopefully will, based on the sample that we saw. Yes, we're going to get a sample. You can see there's a difference in the peak height there. So that's our sample being detected. So for the officer, they're not going to be able to see the results or what it is, the ions. It does all the scientific stuff in the background. They just see that they have a sample response. So a sample's been introduced. It's of a significant value that it's recording it, and then it returns to baseline as it cycles through. So we have an alarm for cocaine, is what it's telling us, a red alarm. So then we would be able to take precautions if necessary if we were an officer. And then we can print out those results, and we can proceed with court proceedings or probable cause using those. So. Okay.
Thank you, Jessica.
Yeah.
Anybody have any questions for Jessica?
Thank you very much for the demonstration, and thank you, AG Yost. I do want to introduce before we do the roundtable introductions, I would like to introduce some of our colleagues that are here with us today. On my right is Bob Latta. Representative Latta represents the Northwest area of the state of Ohio. We also have with us Dr. Brad Winstrup, representing Southwest, kinda. A little over. I don't want to take anything away from Mr. Shabbat. Representative Steve Shabbat is also here from the Southwest area. And then my Central Ohio colleague and sidekick, Mr. Mike Carey, the newest member to Congress. So thank you all for being here. And Mike and I really appreciate you all taking the time coming up here out of your districts to do this. I will now introduce the roundtable, and I'll let Leader McCarthy kick that off once I make some of the introductions. To my right is the Delaware County Prosecutor and also my friend, Melissa Schiffel. Melissa will have some great insight and conversation, and thank you for taking time to be here today, Melissa. Next is Sheila. Sheila and I got to know each other really well during COVID. I think the first week that COVID came, I picked up the telephone and called Sheila, and we developed a great relationship with not only myself, but our office. She did several town hall meetings with us, going through the pandemic and answering very, very many questions. Dr. John Sprague, who's with the AG's office, is also part of this. And then last but not least, our Chief of Police in Westerville, Ohio, and my dear friend, Chief Chandler. Chief can be very insightful, and I'm going to let Leader McCarthy kind of kick off with, Chief and kind of talking about that, what's going on in the communities. Westerville is a perfect community to have that discussion. Chief has allowed me to ride around with his officers at different times to experience the day in life of about 2.5 hours of a police officer. So thank you for your service, Chief, and all of you. And Leader, it's all yours.
Well, what I'd like to do, Chief, if you take the mic right there, I'd like to hear from the Chief and Melissa and Sheila. Just give us an update. I mean, you're far from the border, but these drugs are coming here, and what are you seeing?
Well, I think what you look at, and also what Troy didn't mention, is I'm president of the Ohio Association of Chiefs of Police, so really I can speak on behalf of more than just Westerville. I think what you see is you see a lot of pain in a lot of families' eyes because fentanyl, if it introduced into anything, a family may think that their child's just engaging, or their young adult, or even an uncle or a father is just engaging in some type of recreational drug use, and then an officer gets a call for an overdose, and what turned out to not be just some kind of recreational drug use, fentanyl was introduced, and you end up with a family member who has passed. And as police chiefs, we're not, our specialty, we're not drug enforcement only officers. We're trying to take care of the quality of life of people all across the state of Ohio and our localities. So really, as far as chiefs of police, with all the other issues we have now with recruiting and staffing the street, where do you prioritize drug enforcement? Where do you prioritize fentanyl with property crimes, with rising felonious assault rates, murder rates? So really, for us, this all kind of comes as a perfect storm.
But also, isn't it a risk to first responders? I was just reading a story a couple months ago. Some young kids were down in Florida for spring break. These were exceptional kids. They were from West Point.
Right.
They had purchased some cocaine. 4 OD'd, but it came to a total of 6 because 2 who didn't take the drug was giving CPR, but they started OD because it was laced with fentanyl. They had no idea. Are you finding this happening to your officers or first responders too, if they're giving mouth-to-mouth or resuscitating somebody?
Absolutely. That's one of the risks, like I talked about before. This is a substance you don't even have to be using that substance in order to overdose from it. So, that's originally why we started carrying Narcan in our cruisers, was not only for the public, but was because if an officer became exposed to this drug at a scene, you had Narcan there that another officer could immediately, administer that Narcan to officers. But absolutely, there have been officers all across the state especially in the last 12 months, who've been taken to emergency rooms because of exposure to fentanyl.
Melissa and Sheila, grab the microphone, whoever wants to go first. Doctor.
Thank you. Is this on?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. I appreciate the opportunity and the invitation to be here today. And, you know, I echo what Chief Chandler says. This fentanyl is extremely dangerous for our first responders and for our law enforcement, and also for prosecutors, too, who encounter it in the courtroom. Just recently, there was a prosecutor in Ohio that encountered the substance in the courtroom and fell gravely ill as a result of that as well from doing her job. But what I also want to comment on is that it's so dangerous for our citizens, and I think it can be easy sometimes to get wrapped up in statistics and forget about the human beings' lives that are lost and actually the impact that has on their family. And if I can, I'll share a story about a case that we have going on right now in our county, so I can't get into a lot of specifics, but I had the opportunity to meet a family member last year who cried when I hugged her and said, "Thank you for doing your job," because her entire family has been killed by someone who was impaired on fentanyl. That is a family that we will remember for the rest of our lives every single day because this drug is so dangerous. It's dangerous for our citizens who take it. It's dangerous for all of us who are out there on the roadways and encountering people who are taking the drugs as well. So I appreciate this conversation, and thank you so much, General Yost, for all of the steps you are taking to increase our ability to do our job as prosecutors when it comes to prosecuting these drug possession and traffickers.
And Sheila, maybe you can talk to us a little bit about what's happening, just last month, the 2 kids at Ohio State University. They didn't think they were taking fentanyl. They thought they were taking a recreational or something to help them study. But because of what's happened along the border, all these other drugs are now being laced with fentanyl. And that's why they're overdosing and dying.
Absolutely, and again, thank you for inviting me to come. I think that is one of the things that we're seeing in all of our statistics, and Melissa's right. It's easy to look at statistics and forget about the families that we're talking about, but of all of the drugs that we've seen overdoses, there are 15 drugs, different drugs usually in whatever kills the person, and fentanyl by far is the #1. And the chief mentioned that in very tiny, tiny amounts, if you look at the pictures when people are trying to educate, they show a picture of a penny, and it's teeny tiny, like the size in public health of a tick. And this is how tiny of a dose that it is that you need in order to have a death. You know, I think when we think about the families and in public health, we're always trying to think about prevention and what could we have done differently. And we had just prior to COVID begun working with our coroner's office every time we had an overdose death with questionnaires with the families and having them to answer these questions either in person or just a questionnaire. Did the person show any signs, and what did you know, and where were they getting their drugs, and all of these things so we could try to get whatever message we need to get out there. But of course, the best thing we can do is not make it available. You know, and to our students, these students that were studying, you know, we were just talking about college. You know, students want to do well, and they think that maybe this is a good thing, and they don't know what's in the drugs that they're taking. So I think that, you know, even just the education, you know, I'm looking at the 2020 statistics, 15 substances were involved in most of the overdose deaths that we had in Delaware County. That's a lot. And of all of the ones that we had in 2020, out of 30 of them, 25 were fentanyl. So really a huge problem.
And if it takes so little, this is why it's so easy to move it across the border. So when you have an unsecured border, you may be far from the border of Mexico. You may think you're not in California, you're not in Texas, but you have now become a border city as well because of the ability to move it through. Dr. Sprague, I mean, maybe you can touch on, she was just saying these other, what people refer to as the Frankenstein opioid. Talk to us a little bit about that, what we're seeing.
That's a new one. In fact, when you're telling the story about Florida, I thought maybe that's where you're going to go, is that there was a few cases in Florida of overdoses from these nitazene compounds. They're called Frankenstein molecules, but it's a chemistry game that's being played. And the bottom line is these agents, these Frankenstein molecules, nitazenes as we call them, they're actually, some of them are much more potent than fentanyl itself. They're not new. They've been around since the 50s and 60s, but never were released on the market because of their potency. But now they're making a resurgence as a result of that. And the other thing, a couple of things I want to play off of here is 15 compounds are associated with overdose. At BCI, we've seen over 20 different forms of fentanyl. So fentanyl isn't just fentanyl. They play the chemical game with fentanyl, and they can change the potency based on the chemical modification. So it's just a chemistry game that's been being played all the way around in this area.
Now, Mike, you have fought really hard on this. I know on the floor you've made the arguments too, and part of it is trying to give the Attorney General a stronger hand, especially with Schedule 1, but 219 Democrats said, no, we're trying to make it permanent, fentanyl to be a Schedule 1 drug. And I know you've fought that in ENC and others, but talk to what you've seen in your community as well.
Well, you know, with this new district, we're going to have most of the city of Columbus. And so we will have the entire south side of the city, we'll have the west side, and disproportionately you see a lot of overdoses in those communities. So this really hit home. And you were talking about the little amount that it takes to cause somebody to overdose. Last year, our Border Patrol agents took in 11,201 pounds of fentanyl. That is enough to kill every American 7 times over. And in just the last year, we have gotten 5,300 pounds of fentanyl. That's what we caught at the border, not what's gone away. That's enough to kill 2.4 billion people. So, Leader, I really applaud you coming to the city of the Columbus, and AG, all the work that you've done, applaud everything that you do. But make no mistake, you've always said this, Leader, every state with this drug crisis is a border state. And make no mistake, these cartels are making lots of money off of this trade. So we got to finish the wall. I know you are here today, and you're committed to, with the commitment to America. I know we're going to work on this in the next few months, and thank you for being here.
Listen, I think you have the only microphone that works here. Let's go to you, Steve, and then I want to go to the doctor as well. But, Dr. Houston,
Sure.
a little further south.
I am. I represent the Cincinnati area, mostly the city of Cincinnati, and I'm on 2 committees in Congress, and I've been there 25 years now. One is the Judiciary Committee, which has jurisdiction over the FBI, the DEA, Drug Enforcement Administration, the border, and the other committee that I'm on, and I'm the lead Republican or ranking member on that committee, is the Asia and Pacific Subcommittee of the Foreign Affairs Committee. And our principal responsibility is countering China. So you got the border, you got drugs, and you got China. The precursors of much of this is coming in from China. They're killing Americans. This is our principal adversary, rival, some would say enemy on the world scene. That's where it's coming from. Now, once it gets into Mexico, as we've already mentioned, it's coming freely across the border because this administration, the Biden administration, reversed all the policies which actually secured the southern border. And also, the leader said that border cities, we think generally of California and Texas and New Mexico and Arizona as being border states. Ohio is now a border state. It's coming here because the administration, basically, when people come over and claim asylum, and that's hundreds of thousands of people, you know, consistently, they're put at your taxpayer expenses on a bus or on a plane and shipped all over the country, and they're not telling members of Congress where they're going. We've been seeking that information. Law enforcement's been seeking that information. We can't find out where they're going. So they're being shipped all over the country, and the drugs are going everywhere, and it's killing about 100,000 Americans every year. Again, mostly young people between the age of 18 and 45. This is our future. That's essentially what's happening here, and it's getting worse and worse. And Title 42, if they're successful in what they want to do now, it's going to make the problem, which is already terrible, about 3 or 4 times even worse.
I know you were a doctor before you came into Congress. You now serve on Ways and Means, but you're also on the Intel Committee. And so you see a lot of this, and you also see that this fentanyl comes from China, poison America, but now they've got a place to bring it in through an unsecured border through Mexico. And cartels are making billions of dollars, not just sending people, but the drugs as well.
Yeah, you're exactly right. And I had the opportunity actually to go to China about 6 or 7 years ago. I don't think anyone's going right now. But we brought this issue up when we were meeting with Chinese officials that, you know, people were able to get this through the mail from China. And we asked them to shut that down, and they took some efforts to do that, but as has been mentioned, they just started sending the precursors to Mexico, and it's a joint business effort, I guess, with the cartels. You could call it that. As you know, Leader, we've got our doctors caucus, and as doctors, we went down to the border to see what was going on. In many ways, what we were interested in is seeing what was going on with COVID, communicable diseases coming across the border, and what we're doing to screen for that. And as you came across, just for example with COVID, you weren't even screened unless you had symptoms, and people were allowed to stay in our country. There's a reason we have Title 42. It's to protect us, and it's to protect us from things that affect our health, maybe our ecology, etc. But that's the premise. Well, how many deaths do we have to have in the United States of America for it to be considered a health crisis? I mean, that's what I don't understand. And one of the problems that I see in Washington is, we have those in Washington that are saying the fentanyl situation has nothing to do with the border itself. That the border situation, those are two separate issues. They're not two separate issues. They're not two separate issues. Our Border Patrol is being overwhelmed, and you can talk about what we've apprehended, so think about what we have not, because they are so overworked. When you have 3 border agents for 25 miles, which is what I saw when I was down there, it's impossible. It's impossible to patrol all that. And so the situation, they were totally linked, and I think that we have to consider, remember this. Look for this problem, and we've been saying this for years, whether it's been heroin coming across, whether it's been, other drugs besides fentanyl like methamphetamines. No matter what it is, the very problem that we have in our country, and I'm looking at this from a healthcare standpoint with people that are addicted, that the situation is something that we have to face from the border first, but all the way to getting people through rehab and into work. You want to stop those that are selling these drugs. You got to stop the supply. And the supply right now is too stealth, if you will, and too dangerous. And people, like we've mentioned so many times, don't think they're taking something dangerous, naive or not, and then they end up dying. This is a serious problem, and the border is the ultimate source of where it's coming. And if we don't secure the border, we cannot even continue to do things to get people better, because they're going to die first. And it's a serious problem. The only ones winning right now are the cartels. They're winning every step of the way, human trafficking, everything. It's just overwhelming. The cartels are selling a product, and they are selling a product that it's okay, go ahead, go to America, and when you're overwhelmed with that, it's easier for the drugs to come across.
Thank you, sir. One of the biggest concerns I have is President Biden doesn't even acknowledge the harm of the open border, what it's doing to this country. Number of people that it's killing, the terrorists who are coming across. Not only that, he offers no federal help. Here you are with the Attorney General, others in the community. He's allowing the drugs to come in, but allowing no help to try to stop it. And then his only solution was try to rush to lift Title 42? I'm just thankful the Attorney General joined the suit. Why is it that we have a crisis the size that we do with the border? The President asked the Vice President to be a part of it. The President's been in office more than 40 years, but from any reporting I have, he's only been near the border one time. We've all made trips down there, but his only offer is lifting this Title 42 for the answer. Only make it worse, not better. Even people on his side of the aisle have told him, but instead of him making the decision not to lift it, he asked a judge to make that decision. That's not leadership. That's not doing anything for the Americans who are dying. That did nothing for those Ohio State students who did not think they were buying fentanyl. I don't believe they would have bought fentanyl. Did not know that they were buying something to help them study that killed them. Bob Ladd has been in office with me for a little while. He serves on Energy and Commerce, has dealt with a number of these different issues especially about what's going forward. I want to take a little of your take on what you're seeing too in Ohio.
Well, thanks very much, Leader. And I want to thank you for your leadership on this, not only on the border, but also on this drug situation we have in this country. Our great Attorney General, I want to thank you for your leadership, what you've done, and because, again, it's important. I also want to thank our panelists. You know, my years here in the General Assembly, I chaired the Judiciary Committee in the Senate. I chaired criminal justice in the House, and I worked with the prosecutors. I worked with law enforcement. I worked with the courts. I worked with everybody. And I'm going to tell you right now, there was nothing ever to compare what we're into right now. On energy and commerce, we have health underneath of us. And back 2 Congresses ago, on the 115th, when we held control, we passed what we call H.R. 6. We took over 60 pieces of legislation into one bill to move that bill through Congress to try to do something. And we thought it was horrible at that time. We had over 73,000 people dying from drug overdoses at that time. But we saw a little bit of a downtick, but now all of a sudden, it went up to 100,000, then 107,000. We don't know how much higher this is going to go. So, we have to make sure we're getting something done out there. I've got the fentanyl bill out there. What we want to do is one thing. We want to make sure it's a Schedule 1. What you just said about all the different variations with the drug, make it a Schedule 1 drug right off the bat, because that's how we're going to have to fight it. But, when I think about law enforcement, I ride with the Highway Patrol every year, and you're absolutely right, because when you talk about with our law enforcement out there in the field, you get this stuff on you. It happened in Toledo. We had an officer up there that went into a house, came out, turned the air conditioner on, it was on their clothes. Fortunately, they had Narcan in the car. But that's one of the things I always ask when I'm out on the road with them, how much Narcan do you have? Because also you have to remember, just in case for you've got to have something. So, this is critical, because one of the things about fentanyl and the drug crisis we're in right now, this is not something people can say, this is what happens down in somebody else's town or on the other side of town. This is in our own backyard in people's own homes. And so this is a killer, and as you're absolutely right, go to the DEA website. Look at that penny. And that little penny will show that little tiny fleck of fentanyl, and that's enough to kill you. And this is what we've been battling. But we've got to have this stopped at the border, because as Mike brought out, when you think about 11,201 pounds of fentanyl coming across that can kill every American 7 times over, this is what they interdicted. We have no idea what got across. And so when we have an open border down there, as this leader has brought out, all of us have been there, we've all seen it. And I'm telling you, our law enforcement, the National Guard down, everyone, they're totally overwhelmed. And we got to do something about it, because this is going to keep killing Americans, and it's not going to stop until we put an end to it. And it's got to stop at the border.
You know what's so telling about your bill? We put his bill up to make fentanyl a Scheduled 1, permanent Schedule 1 drug. What that would mean is you could have mandatory minimums, deter people from having it. 219 Democrats voted against it. So it can all go away and not be treated as a Schedule 1 drug, even though it's the #1 killer of Americans between the ages of 18 and 45. I do want to say one thing, though, too. I want to thank all the Border Patrol agents. They are going above and beyond to do their job. And what's happening, if you go down to see them, as they apprehend individuals, they have to take them in. Lots of times, children and others. So they're left off the border. And what is happening when you talk to them, these cartels are sophisticated. When I was just down there, they'll have a lookout person. Then they'll send a bunch of women and children in one place, so you all have to go get them, so there's no agents, and then a big group of just all men coming across. And what else this administration has done has taken away ICE, our interior enforcement, what you're seeing. So now it's encouraging more people to come. And it's the lowest level ever of apprehending anybody in the inside. If you ever walk through these facilities, the first thing that happens when someone comes in, they're given a cell phone paid for by the taxpayer. The cell phone is given so you can make phone calls so you'll eventually show up at your court date maybe later, which does not happen. And the sad part about this is prior, this border was secure. And it was growing to be very secure, and they only had these small openings of the wall left to do, and now people just walk through. Even though we've already paid as taxpayers for the material, it's sitting there, now we're paying more money for it to sit there. We have to pay a penalty not to finish it. But that's the choice of this administration. And it's coming home to each and every one of our communities. With that, let me stop. I'm going to have the Attorney General say a last word about Title 42, what that would mean had he lifted it. And it still could get lifted. That's why I'm thankful that you continue to fight this. And then let's go to questions.
Yeah, to be clear, this is a district court decision. It's very well reasoned, very well written, but the administration has pledged to take it up to the Fifth Circuit, and I don't doubt that it may end up in the Supreme Court at some point. Here's the best estimate. 18,000 people a day is what we're going to see coming across, in addition to what we're already seeing if Title 42 is lifted. About half during the pandemic of the people that were trying to cross were turned back because of Title 42. It is the only tool that is really working to try to stem at least some of the deluge that we're seeing at the southern border. This is not an anti-immigrant thing. This is a basic security issue, not just the things that we've been talking about here today with drugs and ISIS and terrorism. We have other things. We have reliable reports of human trafficking, of sexual abuse and rape that's occurring with this influx, not because they're bad people. That's a small number of people within there that are committing these acts. But the fact of the matter is we're not controlling that border at all. And the chaos is what's breeding these horrible things. The first job of federal government is to secure our country. That includes the borders. The Supreme Court several years ago told Arizona, stand down. You're not allowed to do this on your own. That belongs to the federal government under our Constitution. Okay. I think what we're hearing today is evidence that the federal government needs to step up and do its job. Thank you, Leader, for your leadership on this and your advocacy. We appreciate it.
Well, thank you. And let's go for questions for anyone up here. What we've really found is not post-pandemic, pre-pandemic, it's post-election. I went there right after the election, and we had just finished a new facility. And on that day, they hit capacity. They never thought they would. It's a huge facility. And in walking through, there was 12 of our members, and we were talking to some people who were there, and we asked them how long was their trip, and one said it was 21 days. And we asked them, why did they come? And they said, Joe Biden invited us. They felt as though with the presidency switching that they were invited to come. And let's be very clear. We bring 1 million new Americans into this country every single year, and we're proud of it. But you cannot maintain a country without a secure border. We are the most open in the process to the number of people who become citizens in any other country in the world. And the idea what's happening is no longer what the president told you, it's just 3 countries down in Latin America. 160 other countries they've had people coming across from, and in groups. So think about it. Why would you catch early on, this is when I was down, I think it was March of a year ago, sitting with the border agents, telling me they started to catch people on the terrorist watch list. I said, oh, from Latin America? No, from Yemen. Not on the same day either. Why would people on the terrorist watch list, as far as Yemen, be coming across our border? What do they have planned? Who are they talking to? Now, just today, they've arrested an individual associated with ISIS that was bringing people from ISIS in to kill former President Bush. And you know how they were going to come into America? Through the southern border, because it's wide open. And we're watching that. And if you speak to any border agent, they're just overwhelmed. And it's because they've taken away the power to stop people. And during the pandemic when we were there during the pandemic, people were not being tested. And then it was so overwhelming, they were taking people and shipping them to cities and not telling their mayors. Now think for one moment, as we go through COVID and COVID still hits us, if people are just walking across and can't be tested, and then this week we talk about, and maybe the doctor can talk to you a little more about monkeypox or others, whatever else, and not to be tested but be sent into communities. Well, during the pandemic, we had these communities being shut down for the citizens, and then you're bringing new people in who haven't been tested, who they will tell you, on average, they were seeing about 15% of them people had COVID. That's a real challenge. I don't know, when you did the doc caucus down there.
Yeah, and yeah, what we saw is, you had American communities being shut down. Everyone have to be tested, vaccination cards, wear a mask, all these things, and people walk across the border, and they're not being tested unless they happen to have symptoms, and then they're just sent out into America. On my plane trip back, you would see people that had an envelope around their neck that had all the information, because they don't speak English, and it had all the information about where they were going and whatever. They don't even have IDs. You can't get on the plane without an ID, but they could. I mean, it just doesn't make any sense. And as Kevin alluded to it, we all came from somewhere else. Unless you're Native American, we all came from somewhere else. We're for immigration, but we have to have a system. And understand what is really happening and how the cartels are winning in this situation. They are selling something. They have a product, and we have made it easier for them to sell their product. People are paying to be brought into the United States. They are being told that the promise is, it's okay. It's okay. Joe Biden said it's okay. And so they come here, and I think many of them very innocently in the entire process. But with that, you've got to have control. I went to Australia a few years ago, and as I got off the plane, one of the questions was, have you been in a lake in the last 6 weeks? When I said yes, I was quarantined. Why? Because they want to ask me questions to make sure that I'm not bringing something in from that lake that could destroy their ecology or their health. It's not uncommon for countries to do this. As a matter of fact, it's smart. That doesn't mean that you are an angry, non-compassionate person. And what blows me away even more is you have people that want to leave lawless countries, and they're coming to the United States only to realize once they get here that we are turning into a lawless country.
The other thing you have to realize, everybody that's coming across is paying a cartel. They're not walking themselves. And they're paying more than the drugs. These cartels are making more than $1 billion a month. They're becoming more sophisticated, armored. You're getting human trafficking. You're having rapes. You're having deaths of individuals coming across. This is the challenge of what's happening when you keep a border that is open. And this is what has to change. Any other questions?
One, you do have to be concerned, but when you have your agents involved with these open areas, at least with a wall, then you start to bring things into focus. And you can monitor for anything coming in aerially, drones and things like that. That's a concern. That's a very good question. But when your agents are so consumed and the National Guardsmen going out into the water to try and save someone, then the numbers aren't working in your favor. So you ask a very good question, but your resources become more and more limited. And I will tell you, amongst the border agents, a lot of them are retiring because they have been overworked and they have had it. And not only that, they're not only working as border agents, they're doing child care. They're taking care of all these other issues. So the resources become less, but a wall starts to limit where you come in. And, Chuck Schumer said at one time, when people come to America, You know, they shouldn't see a wall, they should see the Statue of Liberty or something like that. I agree with him. That's what they should see, same way my grandparents did.
You talk about a truck and an airplane and others. You got to have a road, you got a path. It's hard to bring something illegal in there when you can monitor it and know right where it's coming. That's what a wall provides. It directs it all to one place. What we're finding with fentanyl, it is so small, they're taking it in their water bottles loaded up with fentanyl. And what's happening today, because the border is open, what the cartels will do, if you go down along the border, you'll see people watching. And so they'll rush a group of women and children. So the agents have to all go pick them up, and then they have to go with them and take them into the center. Well, now it's wide open. That's when you'll see it rush through. If you don't have a wall there, or if you haven't finished the wall, there's certain areas within there where you are building like 140 miles of the wall and they finished 124. The material's sitting ready to be put up. But on the day he was sworn in, he stopped all proportions. If you can't secure your own border, it's very hard to have a secure country. That's the challenge, what we're finding. We would love to be able to have a direction where people coming our borders are just coming through a road or a plane. Why? Because you could find things that are happening there, and you have a greater secure and control over it.
$65,000. We are, I'm sorry, a piece, yes. We're funding this, and we've been rolling it out as we find willing partners in the counties, and it's phased because we can only train so many people at a time. But I think we are, Jessica, are we how many do we have right now? Do you know, out in the field?
Let me thank all the participants up here, and especially all from your Attorney General and the members, and especially for all the work you're doing to protect protect the community. You never thought, being this far from the border, that your real problem is so many thousands of miles away. If we secure this border, it'll stop fentanyl from being the #1 cause of death to Americans between the ages of 18 and 45. We thank you for participating and being a part of this. Take care.